Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews and to another book review here on the channel. I'd call this a rapid fire review, but I would be lying because it has been a couple of weeks since I read this. I'm just trying to catch up. You've seen the title and the thumbnail. We're talking about Fractured Infinity by Nathan Tavares. This book comes out or came out depending on when I get round to editing and putting this up on the internet on the 1st of November from Titan Books here in the UK. I don't know if it's got a different American release. I can only go off what I know. I was sent this lovely review copy for free from the publisher in order to review it. Regardless of where books come from, nobody's paying me to talk about books and all opinions are my own. I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as humanly possible. I don't think that spoiling this book would ruin it for you, but I will try my best. If you do want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, click away now, come back when you've read it, we'll chat then, and I'll link the story graph below in case you want to check out any user-generated content warnings. This is, I believe, Nathan Tavares' debut, though he has already written a whole bunch of short fiction that's been published in various places. I think this is his debut novel, I'm not absolutely certain on that. It is a adult sci-fi book, and let me read you the blurb. Hayes Figueiredo is struggling to finish his documentary when handsome physicist Yusuf Hassan shows up, claiming Hayes is the key to understanding the Envisioner, a mysterious device that can predict the future. Hayes is taken to a top-secret research facility where he discovers his alternate self from a parallel universe is a brilliant scientist and inventor. Hayes finds a man he doesn't recognise, angry and obsessive, who is married to another Yusuf. As Hayes and Yusuf fall in love, Hayes studies the multiverse and imagines the perfect life that they will live together. But when tragic events strike, he realises he must do anything he can to save Yusuf's life, because there are infinite realities, but only one Yusuf. With his heart and the fate of countless realities in his hands, Hayes leads Yusuf on the run, tumbling through a kaleidoscope of universes, trying to save it all. But even escaping into infinity, Hayes is running out of space. Soon he will have to decide how much he's willing to pay to save the love of his life. Bam. Gay sci-fi! I'm always here for it. I also recently realised that I have relatively few books featuring men who love men that are written by men. Very few of them, so I'm glad to add another good recommendation to that list. I find it very interesting. The structure of this book is that Hayes is looking back on his time. We are reflecting on something, but because the character Hayes is a documentarian, a filmmaker, a lot of it is set up as he would set up the documentary. I'm trying to think of a good example. I think probably the first page has some bits. And here in the cerebral sci-fi movie, not a blockbuster, not my style, based on the next year or so, the title card will roll something evocative in all caps. Cue the score and cut to Hayes, and there's even little bits of imagined script in the middle of this. I actually very much enjoyed it. For some people, I think it probably would get a little bit irritating. For me, I really liked it as a framework for the book, and I think it really helps you to get to know Hayes as a character and what makes him tick and how he sees the world, which I think is very important because arguably he does some things that, as a protagonist in a book, we are not necessarily meant to agree with. This idea of killing billions to save one man. In a lot of other books, that's you are the villain, you are doing terrible things, but because we really understand how Hayes sees the world, it doesn't come across that way, or not quite so much as it might otherwise, and I very much enjoyed that framework, and I think it adds a little bit of humour and an inject of non-sciencey stuff. What's the word I'm looking for? Pedestrian? I'm not sure. Where a lot of sci-fi books get very technical, this is the opposite of that. This is bringing it to the people, normalising it, making it, again, more pedestrian. But pedestrian feels like a negative word. I can't think of the right word. It does that. Time travel slash dimensional travel, anything dealing with time, can often get very bogged down, and one of my big criticisms of a lot of time travel books are, for goodness sake, stop giving me rules and give me some entertainment. And I think that this book handles the idea of paradox and all that stuff very well, in that the Envisioner is sort of a machine that nobody understands how it works. They just are figuring it out as they go along, and thus the book tells you as the reader what you need to know. You figure it out as you go as well, and it doesn't get bogged down in all the sciencey stuff. There's still enough sciencey stuff there. If you love sciencey stuff, you'll be alright, but it's far more focused on Hayes as a non-scientist experience of this thing and getting to use the Envisioner and figuring out what is happening. Why is the Envisioner here? What are we doing? And how do I save my boyfriend? I thought the romance was very nice. I think it isn't as romantic as I would have expected it to be based on the blurb, and I think that's because you know it's coming. It is set up from the beginning, it's set up in the blurb that he's trying to save Yusuf. The book doesn't focus on falling in love as much as I thought it was going to do, and therefore I kind of said a few pages and I was like, wait, hang on a minute, we're willing to do all this stuff for him now, right, okay, I am on board with this. I just took longer to get there than the book did. I think that's true of a lot of elements of the story. I took longer to get to the conclusion than the book did. That doesn't mean I didn't appreciate the conclusion. That doesn't mean I wasn't enjoying myself. It just, I had to catch up with where the book was taking me, which is very true of the whole thing. It feels very like you're catching up with your future self in a lot of ways, which does fit with the themes of the book. I don't know if that was intentional. It's interesting. I think all of the basic ways you would describe this book, alternate realities, MLM romance, time travel, almost more time, interesting things to do with time. If I was selling it to someone based purely on one of those things, I think it would not be a disappointment, but it wouldn't be what they were expecting, because it isn't a traditional one of any of those things. It does something very different. However, as a whole, it all comes together in a very solid chunk of stuff. So yeah, I talked about the tone. I like the characters. I think Hayes is an interesting character. I think Yusuf was an interesting character. I would have liked some more side characters in there, but I understand why they weren't there, because this isn't a very long book. I just maybe would have liked a little bit more development in that area, but it's not a problem. I think the pacing is one that's interesting, because I don't think I'd have wanted this book to be any longer. However, I do think that it's a little bit mismatched in the pacing from the beginning towards the end. At the end, it gets very fast-paced very quickly, and then goes. At the beginning, it's a little bit slow, I think, because we're trying to figure out what's important and who's important, and I don't think it would feel that way on a reread, but just in case you're planning on picking this up, power through the beginning. As someone who's read a lot of quite tragic and depressing queer sci-fi, I think that this managed to hit the balance right of still having all the emotional hit points of a sci-fi of this kind, where it's more thought-provoking and about the choices that we make and the consequences of our actions and all of this stuff. It managed to hit all of those things without being, oh, I'm just sad now. There were a few moments where I really thought I was going to have a lot of too many emotions, but I definitely think that it managed to play that balance out well, where it didn't feel kill your gaze, but it didn't feel, I don't know, whatever the opposite of that is. Twee, maybe, I don't know. In terms of things to compare this to, I have been doing some pondering. I think that This Is How You Lose the Time War would be one example. This Is How You Lose the Time War is more novella-esque, more thought-provoking, more abstract in a lot of ways, and more explicit on the romantic side of things. I think not explicit in that sense, just more, this is a romance and this is what we're doing. But I think that there are some elements of, we have to make choices that are very, very difficult and have consequences, and also the idea of running and hiding from consequences and from the people who are after you who maybe want to know things. I definitely saw some similarities there. So if you liked This Is How You Lose the Time War, this is different in tone, but I think you would still like this. Equally, the more recent time travel book that I reviewed was The Future of Another Timeline, which is much darker and focused on a different issue, but still quite gay and an interesting look at time travel in a different way. And if you want to talk about travelling to alternate realities, obviously there's a lot of options around that. I know His Dark Materials has some elements, particularly because they go to Oxford in this. That was the place that my brain drew a connection there. And potentially something like the 10,000 Doors of January, which has more portal stuff in it, or any V. Schwab, to be honest. That's all portal based anyway. None of them are sci-fi, but it does have that element of alternate realities that I think comes into play. I'm sure there are other sci-fi examples of meeting myself from an alternate universe, and I don't like them very much. So if you have any of those, please pop them below. My sci-fi reading, while I've read much more sci-fi in the last 2 years than I think I've read in my entire life up to this point thus far, I'm still distinctly lacking in recommendations to give that are sci-fi. If you look at the shelves behind me, it's primarily fantasy here. I've been a dragons-based reader for too long. I'm trying to get into the spaceships now. Should you read this? I don't think this book is going to be for everyone, mostly because of the tone, I think. That's the big thing. If you don't get on with the first few chapters, if you don't get on with the tone of the book, then I don't know if you'll like this, because it doesn't answer all your questions, and you have to like this character and this way of seeing the world and this way of exploring this particular story. But if you do get on with it, I think it's a really good read. And like I said, I really like having more recommendations of MLM books written by men, because I just don't have enough of them, and that's a bit bad. To be clear, I don't think books about gay men written by women are terrible necessarily. A friend was asking me for them, and I felt really bad that I didn't have that many, so when I was reading this, I was like, yes, I can recommend another one. This is fantastic. So recommendations for those as well, please, down in the comments. While you are down there commenting, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also follow me on social media. Come hang out on Discord where we have chill chats about books. Nothing makes me feel more loved and appreciated than my patrons over on Patreon who support the channel and get early access to videos and bonus content. If you'd like to join their number, that's linked below. Thank you so much for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. I find it really interesting. The structure of this book is that it is